Okay, so now our third intro video is how to import data, how to organize your notebook, and how to save your notebook to hand in assignments and tests and so on. So what I really encourage you to do is that you create a folder for this class. It's really important that you're not just saving your data files and your R notebooks in your downloads folder. So for example, all my notes for this class are in a folder called Biostats Online. I've organized everything by modules, and just like they are in Blackboard. So module 1 in this case is the introduction, and I have several folders here just to keep it simple. And I'm using this folder called Demo Video folder because I'm doing it using it for this demo video. Then once your data file and your R code file that I've shared with you, yours is called, I think, For Students Short, or in that folder, you could just double click that file and open it in RStudio. I'm not going to do that for various reasons. You can also open it this way. Open file, I'm going to open, I'll navigate to it, and it would be faster if you double clicked on it. I just can't today for a specific reason. Okay, so there, it's going to open up. This is your demo file, or the file you're going to be using today. And the next thing that you want to do, and this is going to make your life so much easier, and you'll actually only have to do it once, as long as you want to keep finding your data files this way, is go to Session, Set Working Directory to Source File Location. And what that is doing is that it's telling R that your data are going to be located in the same folder as your notebook. And so when you're importing data in various ways, you don't have to click through 6 different subdirectories to find your data every time. If you don't do this, we'll know because it's going to take you forever to import your data. So we've got this data file, this notebook, and it's going to be using a data file that is monthly air temperatures from a place in northern Alaska called Utqiagvik, where a few professors in the biology department at UTEP work. And the first thing we need to do is import the file. The file is called Barrow Air Temp Month. As I showed you before, I've just written some notes here. You could we do need that in a little bit. And if you look at the outline button, I've got a few little bookmarks that you can see. We're going to learn how to import and attach the file. We're going to do some basic stats on our data. I'm going to close the outline. And so there's multiple ways to import data in R. The first way, the basic way that a lot of people learn, is up here in Environment. If you make it big enough, if it's too small, you can't see it. It ends up being minimized. But here, you're going to say Import Dataset from Text. And look at that. It went straight to the folder that I had already put I'd set in my working directory. So you can click on it, and you say Open. And then it's going to show the input file here in the upper right. It's going to also show you this data frame down here, where your top row here with the column header should be in bold. If it's not, it might look like this. If you see V1, V2, V3, etc., it means that your data is going to import correctly and that R has not recognized that first row as the headers or the column titles. So if this is the case, if it says V1, V2, etc., make sure it says heading yes. Then, you can also here change the name of your file. For example, right now it's kind of a long, awkward title, and you could change the name that it imports as to say just something shorter like Barrow Temp, if you wanted to. There we go. So we've imported it, and it now shows up here in your in the same window as your notebook. Okay. The other way that you can, there's another way that you can import files, and it's I'm just going to do this one. You can also use code. And so this code here is going to do the exact same thing that I just did with the import button. But using code, is a really useful way to import your data, especially if it's for your thesis or dissertation, and you're going to be using the same R notebook over and over again. And every day when you open that R notebook, you're going to have to re-import that data file. If you have it typed as code, you can just run it. It's one click. You're not, searching for that tab, import data, making sure the headers are there. So this piece of code here is, say, read CSV. So it's importing a CSV file. It's got my file name, which is Barrow Air Temp Month.csv in quotations. I'm telling it that header equals true, so that first row is going to be my headers. And I'm renaming the file Barrow Temp, just like I did when I imported it the other way. And when you run it, it imports the data and calls it Barrow Temp. So one of the disadvantages, I guess, of this particular method, it doesn't tend to open the file right away in your window, which you don't always need, especially if it's the file of your dissertation that you're intimately familiar with. So one thing you can do is you can look at what are the column names. So the code names, and then this new name that you gave your file allows you to look up the column names for that particular file. And I should have said before now that if you're not already, you should have your notebook open yourself, and you should be following along and doing the steps at the same time that I'm doing them. So if you're not, why don't you pause the video and open that notebook now. Okay, and then the next step is we're going to attach the file. Attaching the file can be troublesome in certain situations, but when you're first learning R, attaching the file is super helpful. So we're going to use code attach, Barrow Temp, and what that allows you to do is it allows you to refer to the column names, like month, month.txt, etc. Otherwise, you have to refer to the column numbers, which can be a bit cumbersome. Okay, so we did our basic importing. There's a third way to import that maybe we'll cover later, but those are the two basic ways to import. What we're going to do is do some basic stats on this set of data. We'll work with this data set more later, but for now we're just going to do some basic stats. And there's some basic codes that are very similar to the codes you might have seen. Now, they're statistical programs, but you can calculate the mean, the length, or the number of rows, standard deviation, minimum, maximum, median, and so on, just sort of a whole panel of obvious descriptive statistics. And what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the mean of average temp. So you need to know the column name. I've reminded you of it here, which is average temp. And remember, I just type in the first three letters, and then R is super helpful. It guesses what I'm trying to do, and then I can run that code. But I also wanted the standard deviation, so I can also do that. Oopsies. Go. I can run it again. So you can always update your code if you do it wrong. You can also use the code summary, average temp. I'm just pressing the tab button to autofill once it guesses what I'm trying to do. So we get a nice summary of the statistics. And then we can also use this code called table. Let me see. We'll do a table by month, let's say. So we know that we've got data by month of the year. So we'll do table of month, and it's going to give you how many rows there are for each month. So I have 67 data points for each month. And then, let me see, how do we calculate mean grouped by another variable? I'm going to show you how to do this more elegantly in a package in R. But in the base package of RStudio, or R, you can use a tapply function, which is you're going to ask it to take that value, or that variable average temperature, and I want to calculate average by month. So I'm going to index it by month or group it by month. And then I need to tell it what I want to calculate. So I'm going to tell it I want to calculate the mean. So here I've created a table of average temperature where I'm averaging it by month, or of average temperature where I'm grouping it by month, and I'm calculating the average. Don't actually need that parentheses right there. Go away. And when you run that, there we go. So it's giving you the average temperature by month, which, not surprisingly, in the winter months, it's really cold, -25. And in the summer months, it pops above freezing. This is degrees Celsius to about 5 5 degrees Celsius on average. And you can use this same code here you can either copy it or whatever you want to calculate other variables. So you could also do the standard deviation, for example, and it would just pop it underneath. This kind of gets a bit cumbersome. And like I said, later on, we can show you how to use a program called dplyr that will help you group all of these data or these new variables into a single table. Okay, and then there's a little challenge here. I already told you this, that R is going to guess what you're trying to type. So using, I think I already did that. Yeah, I think that's it. So what I want to do now is, this is just a really quick intro to importing files and calculating some basic variables. We're going to save it, and I'm going to show you how to create a file that can be handed in on for assignments. And if we're using the Blackboard program, you have to be able to upload PDFs. Blackboard doesn't like you to upload R files, and I just certainly don't want to see your R files because because I have to run all the code myself, and you can't upload HTML onto Blackboard, so we need to PDF your assignment. So imagine this was an assignment. You haven't, remember, never edit this first, the first usually would be 4 lines. It will look like this. The first 4 lines of code in your R notebook. You're going to save it. Make sure you've run all your code. A notebook is only going to print code that has been run. So if you all of a sudden think, oh, I'm going to add something to line 19, and then you don't actually run it, it's not going to show up on your notebook. So you click preview, and it's going to preview your notebook. And what's neat, if you've noticed, those subtitles that I indicated with the hashtag or the number sign are showing up in bigger letters here. So remember this. Let me see. Go back here. Importing. So the introduction and then import and attach a file all had hashtags and big bold font. Ooh, gosh, now I need to find where I was. Here we go. And so those now are highlighted there. We also have those notes that I've put with the hashtags in the chunks. So if you can't see it in the video, this box here is in gray. Down here in black is the code that I typed, but all the other information that I had typed next to hashtags is in green by default. So it shows, you want to scroll through and make sure everything that you want to show up is showing up on this particular HTML output. Then what you need to do is open it in your browser. My browser's over here. And then right-click and print it as a PDF. And then once it's, I'm not going to do that, but once it's saved and printed as a PDF, you're going to be able to upload it into Blackboard. Okay, and I'm going to show you, well, I'm going to briefly tell you how this differs from R Markdown. I'm going to tell you as opposed to show you, I think. So let me get back to my R. I have a few R windows open. So as I mentioned to you, you're using an R notebook, which I recommend you do. And I told you had to run all of your code before you previewed your notebook. Otherwise, it's not going to show up in the preview. The difference with an R Markdown file is that you don't need to pre-run all your code. Okay, so that saves you time. However, imagine, if you will, that I did something wrong here. I don't know what it would be. I indicated a column that didn't exist. Okay, there we go. What would happen is if I had used an R Markdown file, which I don't recommend you use again as a beginner, what R Markdown will do is it doesn't need me to run all the code in advance, but what it's going to do is it's going to go through and automatically run all my code. And it'll run this one, and it'll get to this one here, and it will find an error. At that point, R Markdown will stop running everything else after that point. And if you then PDF that, you're going to miss half of your assignment because R Markdown is skipping anything after this error. And oftentimes when you're first learning R, you're first doing assignments, you will have these errors. And you don't want to use R Markdown, which will frustrate you in that it won't be giving you all the information you want in your final assignment. Okay, So that's all I wanted to cover in this video, and hopefully you were following along. If not, go ahead and do that now.